Good evening. My name is Christina Zapata. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with YWCA Sonoma County. I am currently a therapist and a clinical supervisor. I wanted to thank Mr. Rafael Vasquez for inviting me to be a part of this video project for post-workshop regarding your career choices and university choices. There's 6 questions Rafael wanted me to answer. They are a bit about my background. What is my present career? What education is required for my career? Is there a future in my field? Number 5, do I recommend a specific university or college? And number 6, any final comments? So a bit about my background is that I am a professional social worker. I have been a professional social worker for over 20 years. I started out being a community organizer. That's the track I studied specifically in social work, undergraduates and master's degree. So in social work, you can study administration and planning, clinical track, community organizing, and international social work. Then there's others. There's like forensic social workers. It gets very broad, very narrow. So I studied the community organizing field practice, and I did mostly nonprofit administration and labor organizing. I was a labor organizing and organized for really good contracts for workers. I was a labor rep organizer for Safeway workers with UFCW, United Food and Commercial Workers, some AFSCME workers in Southern California, and home care workers in Alameda County. That's a bit about my background, is that I'm new to the mental health field. I've been doing the clinical track of social work as a therapist for 8 years. I came onto this field in 2012, so I consider myself a newbie. So that's a bit about my background. I'm Texan. My family we're all Tejanos. Have a big tribe there in San Antonio. Was lucky enough to study in Mexico for a little bit, which is where I learned my Spanish, and then I forgot it when I came back to the US, and then I relearned it. Spent most of my career or my formal education time in Michigan. Okay, that's my bio. And that's important because my grandparents worked in Texas, but they followed the crops and both met in Michigan. So they went north. That's how my family is there. My present career, as I said, is to be a mental health practitioner. I'm a therapist. This means that I use psychological interventions and psychology in my field, my culture. Community resources, lots of tools to help people struggling with mental health problems. That's my present career. And I'm a clinical supervisor, which means that other associates and interns and trainees, folks that want to do mental health professionally, have to have somebody who's licensed, supervise their work and review their cases. So as a licensed mental health person in California, this means that I've passed, not only have a master's, a bachelor's, passed a national clinical exam and a state of California law and ethics exam. That's what gives me the license, and then it means I can supervise other people. And that's the primary bulk of my work. The education required is a master's degree minimum in counseling and psychology, social work. Is there a future in licensed clinical social work? There is a huge future. The pandemic is creating such a need for nurses and doctors and for families, even for people who contracted COVID. One of the things that that is being studied is secondary effects, and one of them is depression. So whereas people pre-COVID, pre-contracting the virus, may not have been depressive types, have found themselves to be depressed. And the factors related to being in isolation, contracting the disease, losing work, suspending those variables of the pandemic, it's contracting it alone that caused, in some studies, they're finding some depression. So there's also a thing called vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, and it means that even working just with someone can cause an impact to you. So nurses and doctors, as I was saying, um, are seeing a lot of loss, experiencing a lot of loss, a lot of hopelessness in some cases, and this is causing them stress, causing them to have acute stress. So there is a future in this field. The colleges and universities that I recommend are Case Western in Ohio, University of Michigan in Michigan, Michigan State University in Michigan, Columbia University in New York, and I got my master's in San Francisco State University. That program was going through some transitions, so I wouldn't say I recommend it unless they're back on track with their administration. But the students are awesome. So I'm still in touch with many of them, and just at the master's level, my friends are now like just they're leaders in the field, in the profession. They want to advance social work. They don't like our field being stagnant. So that was the beauty of San Francisco State University. Nice energy and vibe there with advancing how we treat psychology and our interventions and looking at them. So that's it for the universities. Any final comments? My final comments are that in my field, in whatever field you choose, that you continue your training. I am EMDR certified. EMDR is an evidence-based treatment for trauma. It's popularly used with veterans, but other people who experience different kinds of trauma. Sexual abuse, physical violence, war, and then kind of everyday stressors and things that people have to manage, such as social anxiety, panic attacks. So in addition to my general license, I also have the certification, EMDR, and I'm currently starting a 13-month training program called Alternative for Families, Cognitive Behavior Therapy. And the reason why I'm embarking on this training of 13 months is because our community needs tools. And if I get training, then I'm able to pass this on and try new interventions and give the families and individuals I work with new things to try, so they can relate better to themselves and experience more fulfilling relationships with those around them, whether they be in the workplace, with teachers, professors, with their friends, with their peers, or their relatives. Those tools are important. Other final comments, I am really attuned to the services in our community. My work is really, it may seem like on paper, oh, provide therapy, somebody comes to my office, somebody logs on a video call, and I do talk therapy. It's a lot more than that. There's so much trauma. People are coming in with so many diverse needs that it's my ethical responsibility to be aware of all the services, many of the services in our community. Other final comments, study abroad if you can. I studied in Ukraine when I was thinking I was going to go in the international social work direction. Ukraine, post the Soviet Union breakup, was one of the many countries in that region, Central Eastern Europe, looking at treating domestic violence as something outside of the family home, something that belonged in the realm of the public, something that the police could respond to. Whereas before it was treated as a private family matter when there was domestic violence. There was a lot of training of police, public officials of how to change laws. So I studied abroad. And while I was a student and undergraduate at Michigan State University, which again is my alma mater and I love. That's cool. And I also did study, not study abroad, service projects through my university, and which led me to travel quite a bit in Mexico. Very, very happy to spend my time doing service learning projects during spring break. Service learning versus, taking the vacation and doing other things. I continued my learning in those little spring breaks. And each time I went to Mexico, and it's also really informed my learning. So yeah, be engaged, be involved with your community. You don't have to be the person in the front. You don't necessarily even have to be leading all of this work, but just being aware of what's out there. And studying abroad, and continue your learning and reading. My email, if you have any questions about how therapy works and what is therapy, and is Christina.Zapata, number 2 at gmail.com. Christina.Zapata, number 2 at gmail.com.